Well, there's a lot of things, and it became more prominent as I started examining and like broaden out the amount of things that I have opinions on, fleshed out opinions on, is there are a lot of stuff that I'd advocate for, or that I would say that I believe in, and it would make me even physically uncomfortable. Like I would have a very strong emotional reaction to it because my gut and like years of socialization and just whatever, like all of that says no. But in my head, I've thought it through and I'm like, yeah, this makes sense and I accept it. Like this doesn't cross the threshold for me. I just personally find it really icky, but I'm not going to base like entire ideologies or like, I'm not going to decide rules, but why, according to what makes Katie feel icky, And I feel like a lot of people do that.
I try to be as consistent as I can. I think I do a pretty good job with that. I think people misunderstand what consistency actually looks like sometimes, but yeah.
I agree. That's also a thing that's true. I guess the example that I had is that I've always been like pretty much very hardcore against the death penalty, for example. And
yeah, same.
That's partially like a logical thing, but also just because when I was a kid, my dad told me that it sucks, and you're a kid, you believe in what your parents tell you, right? But then it was like 2.5 years ago, and I was going through a personal struggle, and like I had a certain serial killer on my mind a lot. And I suddenly became very emotionally sympathetic to arguments for like the death penalty. I was like, I know I'm against the death penalty, but also like I'm really happy they executed that guy. And when I realized that, I was uncomfortable. I was like, well, there's a contradiction here. And then I went over it for a few days in my head, and I'm like, well, this sucks to say, but yeah, I'm still against the death penalty. And even though I'm really happy they executed that guy, I'm also, I don't think they should have, and that's pretty much how I,
it's interesting.
How so?
I don't think it's really even inconsistent. I mean, like on practical level, I definitely also am against the death penalty because I think there's just often no way to be able to say for sure a person did something. And I don't think it's reasonable to kill innocent people. But I don't think that precludes that I could be happy that a murderer was killed, or like a horrible dictator, I don't have a problem with that, honestly, and I don't think it's inconsistent.
Very quick. I think it would really only be inconsistent if you also believe that, like, you shouldn't enjoy that. You know what I mean? Like, maybe if you believe that people shouldn't get satisfaction out of, like, what's coming to them, you know what I mean? Or the death of a person, I could understand to an extent. But I don't think necessarily, like, because sometimes I really enjoy beating the shit out of someone. It would be really fun to just get into a fight and beat the shit out of someone. I don't think that we should legalize doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that the way that I saw it as inconsistent was like from the concept of that a lot. And one of the arguments for the death penalty is like restoring justice, right? It was, and the way that they see it as like a restoration of justice is like justice is done when you execute the person who did the bad thing. And I guess if the only way, in the same way that like when we talked about abortion, like the bodily autonomy kind of circumvents like the personhood question, if your argument against the death penalty is that you simply, basically, you would have to say that you don't mind executing guilty people. You can just never be sure enough, so you rather not. And that's not my argument, not my only argument against the death penalty. I don't think we should execute guilty people, even if we knew they were 100% guilty. Then it's a contradiction. And that was what I contested with. basically.
Oh, I get you. I'm so glad we actually got on this topic because I had something to share. So my aunt, right? I'm pretty sure, yeah, because the death penalty is in Texas. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure Texas has the death penalty because my aunt, right? She'll go a while ago. She doesn't really do it anymore. She would go online and they had an online roster of when they would have like the public executions. You could go online and you could, I don't know if you could watch the execution. I don't remember if you could watch it, but what they did is all the people who were on there could guess what time the person's heart would stop. And if you win, you get a certificate.
Oh, that's
and she
disgusting.
would be on, and you would learn all of the things. And like when I heard about this, I was like, that's fucking sick. Like,
Oh
why?
my God.
And yeah, no, it really was. And like, I don't try to judge her too harshly. You know what I mean? But it was, and it's not like, and she's like, it's not like we're betting, we're not winning anything. Like you're winning a certificate, but ultimately, you know, and she'll go through and like, I think she's more interested in the actual aspect of the crimes. You know what I mean? Like when most people, but she was saying like, she'll go through and like this person like had killed like 6 people, or this person had kidnapped so many people and like tortured them or whatever. This guy had mutilated his entire family, set him on fire. Like, and she was going through and explaining all of these horrible things to me as if that was supposed to justify like her enjoyment. And I was like, I get it. Like, I get where the scariest thing is I get where she's coming from. Like, because I feel like I do, because I feel like everyone has had that sort of experience. And if you haven't, it's just because, I don't know, there's some kind of environmental aspect with you. But when you are releasing some kind of anger at someone else, like it feels good. It feels good to direct. And it might not, like, once you think on it, you're like, I don't like being this way, this negativity. But fundamentally, it feels good because it's sort of a release of frustration, right? And I don't know. So I can understand that mindset. I just don't. I can understand also why it's heavily corrosive. Like, that's not good.
So the idea of catharsis, basically.
Yeah, but it's crazy. It was crazy to me when I found out that they have something like that, because like, and she wasn't alone. There were literally hundreds of other people, and you can just go through each of the inmates that are up, and they tell you what they have for their meal, their final meal, their last words and shit, and then you just guess on when they're gonna die.
Wow.
And even then, see, and then what people will usually say to me when I say things like I'm against the death penalty, they'll be like, okay, well, what's the worst thing someone's ever done to you in your life? You know what I mean? And they'll bring up something like the worst thing that someone's ever done to me, and should they deserve, you know what I mean? Or they'll give me all these scenarios of what if someone killed your family? If someone killed my family, of course I would want them dead. You know what I mean? But that doesn't mean that that's okay. I wouldn't, like, for me personally, the closest I've been to a situation like that is when I was like assaulted, you know what I mean? And even the person that assaulted me, I don't want them to be punished for what they did to me. I want them to recognize what they did was wrong. It would be nice if they felt guilt or remorse, but that's not necessary. You know what I mean? That would just be for me. And like, I want them to be able to do better so that they never hurt someone else again with themselves. Mm-hmm. Like, sometimes I do respect, I can understand though, and people who feel differently, like they want their abusers killed, that's valid, but I just don't think that's the proper way to go.
Yeah, the reason why I really struggled when I had that experience was because before that experience, I actually very much looked down on people who would want their abusers dead. Not like in a personal sense, but like I thought that need, that want, that catharsis that we talked about, whatever, I find it to be like it's very unappealing to me, which is why I was very conflicted with myself when I suddenly had those feelings. And when I told you can relate, I can't relate. And I thought, wait, I kind of can. It's just different because I what you're saying there's just so many things that are like messed up about it, because it's not about you wanting your own abuser dead. It's not about even like you hearing about like this serial killer that was in your area and you just was scared, so you're happy when they're like executed. It's just you going online and then you reading why you should be okay with this person being executed and then gambling on it. So that was like why it's different for me. But like, so now I'm against the death penalty, and I can absolutely understand why family members or some people would want that person dead. And I now understand why they would want it, which I couldn't before. But I wouldn't be willing to respect that, as in like tolerate it, as in like allow it.
Yeah.
They'll be like, I'm sorry, that's just like another aspect of you being victimized in that way that you'll have to bear. Because like, I guess my core argument against the death penalty, and I think there are many, and I would use all of them because they're all just very good. But this aspect of retribution, I find it incredibly unappealing. I think when you're willing to put someone to death because you decided that they did something horrible enough to be worthy of death, I think when you make that decision, you have now you've proven yourself to be, you're not the moral authority anymore. It's when you lost all of your justification to be able to do what you did in the first place, for me. And you used that word before, and I wanted to use it several times, and I didn't, but I say it. I think it's incredibly corrosive to one's character, which is why I was really ashamed of myself about having those feelings back then. I was very upset with myself because I was like, why do you have all this hate? Why do you have all this like need for retribution? Why are you okay with this thing where you know that like having all these feelings is completely like antithetical to everything you believe in? And that was like a really eye-opening moment for me, that like sometimes I'm going to advocate for things that are going to make me like vomit a little bit in my mouth, because I don't personally like them, but they are the right thing to do. And that's just it, you know? And I think a lot of people aren't willing to do that, which is a bit annoying, honestly.
Yeah, definitely. It's another thing too, to have a feeling or to think something and then to actually do it.
There's also people feel like they're justified, as in like they think something, they feel it, and then it immediately translates to, so this is how I think things should go. And I think there's also a possibility to be like, you know, and a lot of people who are kind of religious now, and at least in my sphere, do that when they go, well, I feel X, but I don't think anyone else should follow it, right? Which is what I basically preach, right? I DM'd with someone and they don't curse, and I curse all the time. And I'm like, does it bother you when I curse? Like, I don't want to make you uncomfortable. And they were like, well, I don't personally do it, but I don't, you can do whatever you want, you know? And it seems like there are many other people who are like, well, I have this opinion. And then they make a huge logical leap, and they're just like, well, now everybody has to follow what I think because, I don't know, I guess they're king of the world or something.
I think that naturally happens too when people have an objective concept of reality, or they believe it to be objective, especially when it comes to morals.
Yeah, that's a big problem for me, I guess.
Oh, definitely. Same.
Then, to be fair, that is more prevalent on like the conservative side, and you mentioned it Duri earlier with like religiosity and stuff. And like, I don't hear a lot of leftists talking about how there's like an objective moral system, but I'll argue against a lot of mostly religious people, but also other types of like conservatives who definitely seem there's like a way of discovering like the true morals. And yeah, it's especially fun with nationalists. I enjoy those conversations a lot. It's so fucking adorable. I love it. It's so cute. Oh, God.
Yeah, there's definitely some weird things going on there.
Uh, do you ever have it when somebody says something and you're like, there's like 100 ways that this is wrong, and I know you're an adult, but I feel like I should just coddle you, and like I feel like you need a handler.
Yeah. A handler.
It's just like
that's what we really need to be advocating for.
I know that's like sometimes people will say something and I know that it's wrong and I know the implications of it, but the fact that they could believe in it is so adorable to me. It's just like, I want to hold their hand, you know, they're just so cute. And it's like, I think it's because I infantilize them. It's also like, how can I not when they think that? Like, what am I supposed to think? Like, what are my options?
Oh, totally. That's why I don't take like argumentation from right wingers very seriously, because like I know they're just completely deluded. Like how can I take that seriously? I can't.
Well, it's difficult. It's so difficult. Like because like for instance, right? Like I'll usually watch like some right wing commentary just to kind of get an idea of what is going on and sort of just, you know, cleanse my palate a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you just need a palate cleanser. And so I'll watch Ben Shapiro videos sometimes, but not like in their full capacity, and usually through another source so that his videos don't get more views. Like, I'm being passive aggressive as hell, but
that's cute.
They'll like his arguments, like some of the arguments that he makes, I sort of agree with to an extent. You know what I mean? Like some of his economic policies to a degree, I'm like, okay, that makes some sense. You know what I mean? But when it comes to pretty much every single social aspect that he comments on is just so dead wrong. Like he's one of the last people out here still fighting like gay marriage, like and gay adoption. Like there is no basis for it at all.
Well, actually, Ben Shapiro is incredibly interesting for me, and so my ex would watch him a lot, and then we would talk about it a lot. He would watch him like for funsies, like he would listen to him while cooking, and then he would come to like the bedroom, and he's like, "You gotta hear what he just said. It's so funny." And then he would let me hear it, and like go back. It was like a thing that we enjoyed doing, like laughing at Ben Shapiro. But like the reason why Ben Shapiro for me is such a unique case is because he considers himself to be like an Orthodox, and like by my standards of what I understand like Jewish Orthodoxy to be, like he's a degenerate. Like he's
100%.
He's not Jewish Orthodox. Like if people think that Ben Shapiro is what Jewish Orthodoxy has to offer, they do not understand Judaism, you know? And so like I actually understand a lot of what he says, and I understand it because I understand like the religious framework that he works of. And in the same way that I said I think people are adorable, I love when he tries to frame his like purely religiously oriented takes as like something that has anything to do with like actual logical basis, right? It's like you can say like, whatever you want about gay men. I mean, it's like I understand, Ben, that if you just said the Babel, I understand, Ben, that if you just said the Bible said no gay marriage, so no can do for me, that wouldn't be very compelling. So I understand that you now have to make up a lot of really weird crap to justify it to people who aren't religious. But it's still so cute. You know, it's so cute because it doesn't work in any capacity. But that's the beautiful thing. That's like, I know that for him it doesn't matter.
And he comes out too, and he's all like, "It's not about my religion. It's not about my religion. It's about the facts."
Yeah, I think that's adorable, right? Because, and I think he'd admit it. I don't actually know if he'd admit it. He would have in the past, I think. That like, even if those things weren't true, he would still support them because that's what his like religious leaning is. So it's like I had a lot of respect for Jordan Peterson, for example, before I realized how religiously inclined he actually is. And then I wasn't upset with him because he's religiously inclined. I was upset that he coated with a T, his opinions with the code of intellectualism. And it bothered me a lot. My main critique of Jordan Peterson and why I stopped watching his content was because I do not appreciate disingenuous argumentation. I will respect someone saying, look, I am very religious in X and Y ways. And so I just believe in these principles and I will argue for them. I will respect the shit out of that over someone coming to me and trying to pretend like what they're advocating for has anything to do with like real life or science or whatever the fuck Jordan Peterson, like to use the code of psychology and science and rationale and logic. It's like, dude, it's fine that you're religious. It's fine. But don't fucking pretend that you don't. Like I'm supposed to respect your opinion. That I don't like. And that was my issue with him. My issue with him, like the thing that got me off of him, and was that I would never hear what he actually thinks. He would never say, this is just what I think. He would always be this, like, now he does that a lot more. But when I stopped watching his content, because like I had a period of time where all I talked about was Jordan Peterson. And I was like, I watched that lecture. It was amazing. I watched that. It was amazing. And then I listened more and more, and it was all his lectures. None of it was the interviews because he's a lot more explicit in the interviews. But I started noticing that he would never say, and I think X because of Y. It would always be this really roundabout way. And whenever he would be like asked questions from the audience or whatever, he would always be like, well, some people say this, or, well, in some school of thought's this. And it's like, and I've never said that, but some people might. And it's like, okay, but you're obviously making a lot of opinion. Like you're saying things, you're creating a narrative, are you just like not going to claim any of the things that you're saying? You have hundreds of hours of content, but when asked to claim your takes, you won't? I don't like that.
Oh, it's bad. I mean, people will ask him like, do you believe in God? And he gives you this crazy long diatribe about nothing. And the best you get out of him is, I live as though God exists. Okay, great. That means nothing. But we know exactly what you're trying to say. But it's pretty clear that he does it so he can avoid any like legitimate criticism or debate of his points. Because how could you debate an actual point that he has when he's never given it, right?
Yeah. And that's what really upset me once I noticed it. I was like, you just spent 2 minutes using a lot of fancy words to say absolutely nothing as a reply to a question you were asked. That is very irritating to me. I do not like that. I do not respect that at all.
No, I totally get that. And because it's sort of that thing we were talking about earlier. Like with certain statements, there are natural conclusions to your statement. If I say men and women have separate gender roles that they tend to just do better in, and then I say men are stronger and they make better decisions, women are happier, they tend to be happier in the home. You know what I mean? If I say all three of those things, what I'm equating is that women should be doing, housework and men should be out making decisions. Like that's sort of what I'm kind of equating to. Like,
yeah, so he would go and he would talk about how he treats women who are high achievers, and then he would talk how they're generally seem to be less happy. And then you'd ask him, so do you think women would be happier like being less of like a career woman? And he would go, well, I don't know, ask them. Everyone needs to make their own decision. It's like, okay, I respect that. And when I watched that video, I was like, okay, yeah, fair, you should ask them. But there are hundreds of hours of content. So to pretend like there isn't an overarching narrative between every point he's making is disingenuous. But that's the thing, that it is disingenuous. And that was the thing that turned me off of him. Later, I realized that it was all like religiously founded, which was even more annoying. Because, I would have respected him just like, I come from a religious background. This is where I'm arguing from. But to pretend like it's not.
Yeah, but Katie, you know they can't say that.
Why not?
You know
I
that
respect
if they did that,
it. I respect it.
Because they wouldn't. No, of course you would. But then the base, because you got to think about it. Even if Jordan Peterson himself, is pretending that he's not like this, he has these bigoted ideas. The people, his base is made out of these bigoted people, and if he were to turn that and be honest and be like, no, this is based entirely on my religion, and then I have a couple of other things, no one's going to fucking listen to that. The base will disappear. If he were to clarify women were people, like, his base would disappear. Like,
I don't
really
know. Like, I think Jordan Peterson and I think Ben Shapiro truly believe that the arguments that they're making are valid, like, without the religious context to it. But I also think that's just the rationalization. They believe in certain things, but they're also like academically inclined, so they have to like pretend like that somehow isn't contradictory, And I can work with that. What I can't work with is someone pretending like that's not true. And I don't mean like the rationalization part. That's just my critique of it. But the issue is, it's kind of like if you were brought up as a woman and now you identify as a cis woman, okay? And then somebody talks to you and they ask you about like gender relations. For you to then say, well, my opinions have absolutely nothing to do with the fact I was brought up as a woman in any way, shape, or form, and they're completely like neutral, then I'll be like, okay, I'm not talking to you because you don't seem to understand how the human brain works.
Yeah.
Talk to me when you're done with that crap.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have any respect for somebody that can't own their positions openly. Like, if you ask me a question about what I believe, I will tell you point blank. I won't, pussyfoot around it. I won't lie to you. It's like, I don't have to. I can defend them. I believe these things. I'm not going to.
I have one thing to say, and I would actually, in my own personal view, I think Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson are actually operating differently. I think that Jordan Peterson might, like you were saying earlier, has rationalized to himself, that these are the views. Like, I think he actually probably believes what he's saying, but he knows how to steer an audience so that or how to steer a question. That way he isn't as culpable for an answer. You know what I mean?
Really?
And with Ben Shapiro, I think Ben Shapiro is actually completely aware of what he's doing. And here's my reasoning with it.
Wait. I thought your argument was that Jordan Peterson was completely aware of what he's doing.
No. I was saying Jordan Peterson, like he's aware, sort of, like that those are the views that he holds, and he's aware of sort of what he's doing, how he's changing it, but he's not aware that he's actually wrong.
Okay.
Right. And I think, and I'm not saying every single take, but I mean wrong in a bigoted way. He doesn't realize that he's actually bigoted, right? I think Ben Shapiro recognizes that he has actual bigotry. And the reason I feel that way is because of a lot of the debunked videos I've watched. A lot of the a lot of the sources that Ben Shapiro will share actually have the opposing information in it. Like, it actually, like, I remember watching this thing. I can pull it up if you want to see it, but it was, I think it was Abba and Preach. They did a deconstruction video, an analysis of one of Ben Shapiro's talking points, and he posted a thing that confirmed that like 50% of crime was committed by African Americans in the United States. And then he was saying, see, so we're actually doing what we need to do. But in the same aspect, and the same numbers showed that African Americans were 3 times more likely to be shot by police. So for me, I just don't think Ben Shapiro can do that much research and then purposely sort of distribute it, right, in that way.
I
And
hardcore disagree with you. I think they're both I think they're both not malicious, but I think they're both intentional in different ways. So the reason why I said Ben Shapiro is very special to me is because I have a very intimate understanding of the kind of bias that he works from. And even though they are both religious, because I understand, I think, and this is something I always end up talking to predominantly Americans with, I think Americans don't understand a lot about Judaism. Because the most Judaism that they are exposed to is like reformist or conservative Jewish sources, people who are culturally Jewish, which is like predominantly like what mainstream America is exposed to in regards to Judaism. But like with my history, I'm exposed to like very different kinds of Judaism and Jewish thought. So because of that, I see a lot of differences in between Judaism and Christianity, even though for Christians, they're like, oh, it's Judeo-Christian values. It's like, nope, that's yeah, you don't understand the difference, is what I feel when I talk to those people. And because of that, it's kind of like, I understand the type of rigid mindset that Ben Shapiro is working from. And it's not as flexible and as up for interpretation and malleable as what engaging in Christian thought is. Being Christian, even religiously Christian, like most people, like in terms of mainstream Christianity, would say like that Catholicism is pretty strict, for example, and Catholicism's got nothing on like Orthodox Judaism. It's still like, even when I think about Catholics, they are the amount of freedom of what they can say and what they can do and how they can interact with the content of their religion is a lot less restricted as like with Jewish people who practice like hardcore religiously. So I know what Ben Shapiro is coming from when my point is that like I have no doubt that Ben Shapiro thinks he's bigoted, but the thing is, like, he doesn't see it as bigoted. He just sees it as like part of his religion. You'll say that's bigoted. He'll say, hey, this is just like how it is, how the world is. And he'll say that because he's religious and his religion says X, you know? Well, Jordan Peterson has very elaborate illustrative explanations of the religious content that he's working with, which is not something that people who are more like Orthodox Jewish can do. It's just not as up for interpretation as it seems to be the case with Christianity. So I think Jordan Peterson, I think, obviously, he doesn't think he's wrong, which is fine. A lot of religious people don't think that they're wrong. But the thing that's interesting about him is that he's intelligent enough to know that he's not answering the question. And I know that much. And that's why that's my critique of him, because he doesn't engage honestly. And I actually believe that Ben engages honestly, but he's not capable of actually reaching the quote unquote correct conclusions, because the stance from which he acts honestly is biased because of his religious background. Do you get like the distinction I'm making?
I do actually. And I hadn't considered that aspect of it, because I am actually very limited in my experience with Judaism. You know what I mean? And how different people develop under that sort of system. You know what I mean? That sort of religious system. So to that extent, I do agree. I just think for me, like, I don't think the distinction, I think, is in the same sense that you feel Jordan Peterson is too smart to not recognize that he's being dishonest in his approach. I feel like Ben Shapiro is too smart when reading these documents and these sources to not recognize that his own point is proven wrong, right? The only way, kind of like to your point, the only way that would be possible is if, you know, like he had some kind of bias that made it impossible for him to recognize any information that disproved himself. You know what I mean? And I think that's, for me, that's where I got it. But I do agree with you. And I do.
No, I get it. I think that's valid. It's possible that I'm infantilizing Ben Shapiro and like doubting his like quote unquote intelligence. It's not intelligence, right? But like the thing about Ben Shapiro being too smart, like I think the amount of conservatives online that would link a study they think supports their claim only for the study to completely rebut their claim is actually really high. I mean, leftists do it all the time too. And people do it all the time too. And I don't think all of those cases are disingenuous. I doubt Ben Shapiro even reads those sources, right? It's clear that it's like his staff anyway, because he's too big for that. So I guess it's about like this aspect of maliciousness, but I'm also very bad at attributing malice. I just, to engage with your point, I think Ben Shapiro is probably smart enough to understand the flaws in his logic. But as I said, I believe Ben Shapiro knows, whether he'll admit it in public or not, that all studies, it doesn't matter if all studies say that is wrong. It doesn't matter if society says that is wrong. Nothing that says that he's wrong is going to change his beliefs, because his beliefs are religiously based. Like they don't have to be attached to anything else, which is why arguing against religiosity is pointless. Is why I don't do it. Like it's why when I argue with anyone, once I realize there's like a religious undertone, I very quickly like address it, as in like, so if I've proven, if I can give you the studies that said X, Y, and Z, would you then support my claim? And if they're honest, they'll say no, because my religion says that I can't. And then I'm like, then I have nothing to argue with you about, because like you're not actually here to debate. And this is what I mean, like with the type of, I don't think they're dishonest about it. I just think discourse kind of created this culture where people who argue from like, it's not necessarily religious, it's any type of like ideology or dogma, as like Duri said earlier. So that's kind of how I feel like Ben is. That's how I feel like Jordy is, except that I think Ben can admit it to himself and Jordy can't. So yeah.
Jordy.
No, I think we actually agree in that sense then, because I do think Ben can sort of, it's kind of like that. I do think Ben admits it to himself, but I don't think that he's going to admit it to anyone else. Like, because it's very obvious that Ben Shapiro is coming from a religious standpoint, even if he says he's not. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, Jordy has a lot more of like the secular clout than Ben. Like Ben, at least. I mean, again, and this is part of the freedom afforded to people who come from like a Christian background. Like Ben would be betraying his religious, like his religion and how he practices it, if he'll hide the fact that he's Jewish, if he won't wear the yarmulke, if he won't like proudly say that he believes in those things, which a Christian doesn't necessarily need to do. So they can mask their Christian like advocacy as just like, hey, I'm just a secular like university professor talking about logic. And it's like, okay, dude.
Yeah, and I do. It's interesting. I find it interesting because at some point, you know what I mean? I definitely think Ben Shapiro is smarter than me. You know what I mean? He probably has, by most measures, he's most definitely more intelligent than I am. You know what I mean? But I think it depends on what kind of intelligence you're also talking about. But I also wanted to comment, as you said earlier, that you felt like Ben Shapiro's like debated honestly, and I feel like that's
No, I didn't mean that.
just,
Did I say
oh,
that?
my bad. You did. That's why I was a little okay. Never mind. Because I was immediately thinking of all the times he set up those the question debate things at college classes, and like
Okay.
that's kind of how he got.
So what I mean by honestly is that I think, you know, when people talk about grifters, I don't think Ben Shapiro is a grifter. I don't think Jordan Peterson is either, honestly. Generally people who come from like religious types of like mindsets, I don't think they're grifters because they have this thing that is much more valuable to them. What I mean with him debating quote unquote honestly, what I mean by that is he believes in what he says and he will manipulate the conversation to make himself win it by whatever means necessary, almost, except for rejecting his religious ideology. So he'll engage dishonestly, but it comes from the fact that it's like he feels that it's like justified to do so because he's advancing like an honest cause, right? So it's not him doing it for the money. The money is just a good perk. I don't know if Ben Shapiro would like abandon Judaism if they told him, hey, we're taking all of your money if you won't take off your yarmulke. I actually don't know that. That would be an interesting thought experiment. But that would require me like knowing a lot more of his character. But I think that like retaining his religious Jewish outlook makes him money, and that's just like a double plus for him. I don't think he's a grifter though at all. You know, that's what I mean with honestly. I think he believes in what he believes in. I know that sounds silly, but it's like, you know.
No, I totally get you. And from that aspect, yes, I do agree.
It's kind of like how what I mean by honestly is that someone could make an argument. Here's a good example. So if I were to discuss abortions, and I would make the personhood like argument, even though it doesn't matter, because I'm arguing from a bodily autonomy perspective. And I'll try to like pin someone down over like personhood. I find that to be disingenuous because I know that's not where my issue is. I know that's not the core of it.
Got you.
You know?
I got you.
So that's like the difference that I make. And that's why I tell people, it's like, look, it's pointless. I'll just give you personhood because that's not what I'm arguing for. That doesn't matter to me.
I think I probably largely agree with both of you in a lot of ways. I think Ben is more honest and upfront about what he believes and why he argues what he argues. I think Jordan Peterson is not. Yeah. I think he is pretty clearly a religious person, but he definitely goes out of his way to hide that fact or at least obfuscate it. Because it's within his interest, right? Like it undermines his credibility as a professor in an intellectual field, first of all, and especially as one of psychology, which, you know, people who are religious don't generally act very rationally. And I think he probably recognizes that a decent chunk of his audience too, and the people that he caters to are not religious and would probably be turned off by it. So if he were to be very upfront about it, I don't think it would benefit him. And I'm pretty sure he knows that. Like he's a smart guy, even though he's not a good guy.
To be fair, I think that he used to do that a lot more in the past. I think that these days, because I every so often would look at his content, he leans into the religiousness a lot more, but that's because he spent a lot of years when he rose to fame, like cultivating this thing of like, I'm just using religious metaphors to explain this concept or whatever. So now his audience accepts him like doing basically Bible study as like an analogy or a metaphor or whatever. He's like, oh, I'm just using the Bible because there are just archetypes that appear in all these different cultures. So I'm just going to use Christian Bible anyway. That kind of a thing. So I think he definitely normalized it in his audience, and I think he obfuscated a lot less today, but that's because he built a very like strong base for his audience that is put off by religion to tolerate that. So I've looked at recent content of him, and he's a lot more explicit about things, but I don't think it matters anymore. I think it mattered back then when I was exposed to him. And I think once I started realizing that they're not just metaphors, they're not just ways to explain like a concept, that was a huge bummer. It didn't really matter because I was mostly turned off by just how it was impossible to get an answer out of this person. Yes, I hate that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that. I think this is a pretty recent thing, at least in my opinion, but it really seems like a lot of the far right types are falling back more on religion than they used to, especially among younger people. Like, it definitely did not feel that a lot of them were super religious, but now as they've sort of realized that their, traditional Christian values or whatever you want to call them can kind of justify a lot of their bad beliefs, I think they have just fallen back on it more. And that kind of gives Jordan Peterson more leeway to be able to lean into that and be more comfortable with it. Plus, obviously, he's not super academic anymore and he's left school, right? So he also probably doesn't have to care anymore just for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, the explanation that I heard like in lefty spheres about like the more like openness around like religious values and stuff like that is the fact that 2014 2016, like the skepticism sphere, like the great atheists, like atheism being the bomb, like attracted a lot of young, generally right-leaning white dudes, basically, predominantly.
Totally.
And then as leftists came into that sphere and kind of debunked a lot of those things, and now how atheism is a lot more associated with like leftist values, and how we kind of like took control over that part of the internet, like people coming and debating all these like people who were talking about that they got a lot of their points from being like, yeah, I'm an atheist and I'm also going to laugh at Black people for being kind of monkey-like, and then they get into a debate and they get fucking trashed and they look like very unintelligent people and stuff like that. And leftists kind of started to effectively occupy that space. Today, like being an edgy like atheist is not really like a right-wing thing anymore. So they had needed to fall back on like religion, and you can see that. I think I do agree that it's more prevalent today. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
And now it's like it's marketed as like, instead of old value religion, it's just like, why are we rejecting these good things that help structure society?
They frame it as like a guide to how to live well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is kind of like what the guy in the comment that I talked about was saying. He was arguing basically that like it seems that like in right-wing spheres, people are just healthier, they're doing better, they have more stable jobs, they are like pairing up, they seem happier, which, I mean, honestly, it's not a bad pitch, it just seems very like ignorant, I guess.
I mean, it's probably not true is the other thing. Like,
oh, I know, I don't want to argue with it,
right? Like even studies that say that like left-wing people have more mental illness or whatever is completely dependent on the fact that the person is recognizing that they have a problem and getting help, right?
Yeah,
we all know conservatives don't like to admit to themselves that they have problems. So
yeah, I was like, and this is where you can see my mentality at work, right? So I read him talking about how right-leaning people just seem to be healthier, And I'm like, there is no way that's fucking true, dude. I'm sorry. And that's what I thought.
Oh yeah.
But I was like, let's work from the perspective that it is true. Does that matter to me? No, not really.
No.
I'll still argue. And then I just went from there, right? Because I don't even argue with that. I'll accept whatever stupid fact you think exists so we can like discuss the merits. But like with something like that, that is it's a very cute claim. If you know what I say when like I say cute, if you know what I mean when I say.
Totally. It's like, okay, so if I hate trans people, now I'm healthier. Like, what? That is not a value that I'm into. So no. I guess I'm going to keep being unhealthy.
Like,
Thank you.
Right? Like, I feel like the only reason, and I'm wondering what kind of health, physical health, mental, because I remember reading a thing that said Republicans were more likely to be obese. So like, I don't know. You know, and like we can operate from the position that this is a true study, but
well, I think it was more like I hear leftist people talk about their anxiety a lot, and I don't hear any of my 40-year-old friends talk about their anxiety. So so obviously I'm mentally doing better. It's like, okay, dude,
100%.
Do you know there are like really high like suicide rates around men and at that age range? Does that count into your little factoring of things?
yeah.
It's fine, whatever.
For real, you could go so far down that rabbit hole, because then you could also include like, well, how many conservative men don't feel comfortable going to therapy or telling anyone what's going on? How many conservative boys, you know, or young boys and girls raised in conservative households are shamed for their feelings, so they know they can't come forward. Like, there's so many different avenues you could go.
There's so many blatant contradictions that they could never account for. Like, I'm sure most conservatives will tell you that men are more consistent and logical and not as emotional, correct? But at the same time, if you bring up the topic of suicide, we all know that men commit more suicide. How does that happen?
Well, I'll tell you how that happens. It happens because when a man wants to complete a task, he's going to follow through on it. He's not like a pussy woman guy thing that's just going to half-ass it. He's going to get the job done.
Yeah. And on top of that, when you really think about it, right? Most men are just like built better, right? So whenever someone messes with them, they get super angry and they lash out. Anger is an emotion. Like, what are you like?
No, you don't understand.
Not to them,
no. It's not it's different, right? Because like when women are emotional, it's like irrational and they're erratic and they can't think straight. But like a man gotta protect his territory. Okay. And when a guy step into my territory and try to hurt my family that I provide for, that it's like,
more TV.
What is irrational about being angry? I am just doing what I'm biologically inclined to do as I kick that guy's ass, and then I take my waifu and I throw her on the bed and I fuck her whether she wants it or not. Because that's just what I am.
Way to bring it home.
This is the extreme examples we were talking about.
Is it though?
This is so fun. And you know, and they'll say that's a straw man. You know, it's like, I know.
Oh yeah.
I know. I heard people make these arguments. Okay. Duri. I want you to do like the sign off. What we do is like, Shay, what's our outro?
Our outro is, this was, okay, now we got to do Shay, Kate, and Zuri. Well, let's just do,
Duri.
We just got to do Duri. Sorry,
Zuri.
I don't know why I put the Z. I know what her name is. Okay, so it was Katie, Shay, and Duria. Reconnecting for the first time.
Why can you not say her name properly? Like, what is happening?
I thought it was Durian.
It is, yeah. You can call me whatever you want. I don't care.
Yeah, you don't know. You don't know her as well as I know her, and I've only known her less time.
Okay, my point is, our outro is like reconnecting for the first time, basically. I came up with it. No, it was because the first time me and Shay talked, she said that it feels like we're old friends and it's like we're reconnecting, except that we don't know each other. So it's kind of weird to feel like that. And then when we thought about like an outro for the show, I was like reconnecting for the first time, right? Because it's like reconnection, but we haven't like had the connection. That's like the thing. So I want you to say it. So you'll do the outro, because me and Shay, we're supposed to do like intros and outros, but we both feel awkward about it. So we just don't do it.
Oh, okay.
To keep people on shows. You can just be like, you can honestly just be like, this was just for, like, I did it like with an English accent once, where I was like, this was just for clicks. Thank you for reconnecting with us the first time. Some shit like that.
You just mixed our intro and our outro and a bunch of other. I am so mad at you. Why can you not? We've been doing this for like a while. How can you?
I still don't have my animated intro, so I don't know what you're upset about. Like, I still don't have my animated intro.
Look,
where is it? Where's the little ball that bounces?
I may be an irrational woman, but this feels justified, okay? Like,
I'm entirely calm. Unjustified.
Well, you're the masculine one in this relationship, so.
I guess I'll just deal with it. All right. Duri, take it away.
Wait, what am I saying? I'm very unclear.
Be like, this was just for clicks. Thanks for reconnecting with us for the first time. You know, but just put some flair on it, some Duri flair.
Oh, I don't have flair.
Oh no, I felt the flair.
That's also not our outer. Oh my god. I can't.
Okay, so what is
that's our
okay,
that's our outro. She doesn't know what you're talking about.
It doesn't matter. It's like it's fine. You know, I'm sorry that I let my womanly emotions get the better of me. Send me in the house. Like I obviously can't handle like the workplace. I don't have like the emotional stability. So it's fine.
Some real delta male energy right now.
What's the delta male?
Delta, you ain't even beta.
Wasn't this your version?
It's alpha, beta,
gamma, sigma.
It's a much shittier version of beta.
Who did I talk to about pussifying women? No, pussifying men. Women are already pussified.
Okay.
Yes, pussifying men. Delta men should be pussified. Yes. That can that be our new outro? Please.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
So good. It's like every outro is like
an outro.
Yes, it's like this was Shay and Kate pussifying men, Delta men, all the time.